Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Ike. Alaji Kwaranga, it's a nice feeling when they elevate the microphone for you. The Vice President, Senator Kasim Chetima, well represented by my younger brother, Dr. Fashua. The Chairman, AMEDA Abdallah, Vice Chairman, AMEDA Haruna Jallo Waziri, senior officials of government, of course, including the federal government of Nigeria, senior stakeholders of capital markets across Africa, but of course, I should also mention my home country, Nigeria, the NGX Group, very well represented by Group Chairman, Group CEO, delegates at this most important conference, and AMEDA members. Your Excellencies and esteemed guests, it is a profound honor to address you today at this important gathering of Africa and Middle East Depositories Association, even though I don't get to wear the fancy microphone that was reserved for capital market infrastructure providers. I'm speaking on the subject, which was, I think, picked by Jallo, Africa and the Middle East, repositioning in a rapidly evolving global economy. I will confess that it is this conference that made me understand what the acronym AMEDA means. And I had to do some studies and research about AMEDA. And I liked what I found. First of all, you are 2 decades old. And AMEDA serves as the pivotal umbrella association for Central Securities Depositories, clearinghouses, and market infrastructure providers across 30 nations in Africa and, of course, the Middle East. Now, what is very important is that the founders of AMEDA were very visionary, and they recognized that Africa and Middle Eastern countries are united by shared geopolitical and economic interests, share historical and cultural ties, and therefore, on the back of this, could form a formidable bloc for collective action. So AMEDA actually is a platform for action, a platform for what I would call self-interested action. And that is why you've gathered in Nigeria to discuss how to further your interests, and by virtue of the regions that you represent, Africa and Middle Eastern interests. The Arabian Peninsula and the African continent share a lot of history. For instance, we share traditions, languages, religious practices. Your president, the first thing he learned when he came to Nigeria is Omoya, and he has been repeating it to me and everybody since. And I am very touched by that. Historically, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean have served as vital trade routes linking the Middle East and Africa and enhancing both cultural exchange and economic interdependence. Indeed, actually, if I recall as a young student, primary and secondary student, my notion and understanding of trade was not trade between Nigeria or Africa and the West, but actually trade between Nigeria and Africa and the Middle East. And the trade routes and the romance and the vibrancy and our understanding of how money was created, how wealth was built, was actually along the lines and the corridors of Africa and the Middle East. And so the case for cooperation is very compelling. We share the same challenges: security, food security, energy transition, infrastructure development. But however, together, I think we will be much more effective in addressing these challenges than on our own. And so by leveraging our complementary strengths and collaborating on the fact that we share challenges and therefore we have mutual interests, we can not only balance uni and bipolar influences, but also advocate for probably a more multipolar, more even, more balanced world. By pooling our resources and pooling our diplomatic efforts, I heard the Egyptian ambassador here, our regions can exert much more influence globally on decision making. And so 32 countries comprising 44 members and associates have united under the AMEDA banner, driven by a singular mission to enhance the safety, to enhance the efficiency, to enhance the performance of our capital markets. Well done. So this address is designed to stimulate the thoughts of the experts who are members of AMEDA, but it's also designed to do something. And perhaps, indeed, you may pick up from this yourselves. I want to demystify the subject of market infrastructure, the subject of what a CSD is for others. Who are others? The media, policymakers, market intermediaries, and so on. Because yours is a very technical function. And yes, it has fundamental important impact. But if you ask most people, why is a CSD important? Most people who actually have the power to do the things that will make a CSD relevant and important, either in our markets or they don't know. So today, your mission has never been more critical. Geopolitical realignments are reshaping global trade routes. Digital disruption is transforming the rules of settlement and custody. And capital is increasingly mobile and is seeking out the most robust and innovative platforms where it can work. So in this context, countries and businesses across Africa and the Middle East face both unprecedented challenges and extraordinary opportunity. The VUCA reality, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity actually presents a pivotal moment. The status quo is bound to be disrupted one way or the other. That is a given. Which way you sit or stand in this disruption is very much going to be up to you. In this transformative landscape, Africa and the Middle East must not remain passive observers. We have the potential to harness this inflection point and emerge as the next frontier of global finance. However, to realize this potential, we must acknowledge a fundamental truth. Robust financial market infrastructure is actually the cornerstone of 21st century financial markets and the foundation upon which the sustainable growth of financial markets, particularly capital markets, is being built across the world. So financial market infrastructure, the exchanges, the CSDs are no longer silent engines driving capital flows. They are now the anchors of market confidence and bridges facilitating international investment. Just imagine for 1 second that for one reason or the other, global trading in financial markets stops. If you think COVID was a problem, it would be of monumental consequence. And if not addressed immediately, could actually lead to actions that would defy our understanding of how human beings relate socially and in other ways. So market infrastructure is not something to be trifled with. Now, on the, let us say, demystification front, financial market infrastructure encompasses systems, institutions, and mechanisms. So it's not just technology, and it's not just technology that is sitting somewhere where Haruna Jallo Waziri has a nice office. It's about systems, it's about institutions, it's about mechanisms that underpin a smooth outcome. So at the end of the day, they are judged by the outcome. Yes, of course, cutting-edge technology is involved. Yes, of course, the smartest people you can imagine are involved. Yes, of course, policy and regulation is involved. But at the end of the day, the impact is judged simply by what? How many people have access to use these markets that the infrastructure is there to serve? How many institutions? How many products? How is the frequency of transactions? What is the count of transactions? That is the measure of the success of that which you do. As you can imagine, payment systems, and Tokwe mentioned that, are probably what we are used to. At one in time, you maybe heard a clearing instrument called a check, and you actually wondered how checks that were exchanged across the world were cleared, etc., etc. Now, if you imagine that we have moved from that reality to one where in bits of seconds, value between one person and the other is exchanged on securities that sometimes actually never have a physical backing of any sort. That is a derivative of a derivative, for instance. That is the thing that these markets provide. And when you begin to think about stability, you think about risk and volatility and things like that, which in the current context of the world that we live in have become very topical. You can see why financial market infrastructure can actually calm nerves when some of our more, our more adventurous, say, political leaders tend to go off in different directions that spook the markets. Against this background, I want to show and illustrate to you how financial market infrastructure is changing the world. I'm not saying somebody else, was once a believer that the retail investor could not set a market price. I'm not talking about the price in our local market where, yes, we can buy mangoes. I'm simply talking about stocks. And that actually was the prevalent economic understanding in finance. Some of you here know that. The market maker and the market price could not be set by the individual retail investor. Today, financial market infrastructure has fundamentally altered the relationship between retail and institutional investors, challenging that long-held belief that small investors lack the power to influence markets. They do now. It is this very financial market infrastructure that has compelled even the most conservative and traditional policymaker to acknowledge digital assets. That's basically crypto assets, in a more polite context, as legitimate asset classes. So you begin to see and understand that financial market infrastructure is going to, over time, actually upend our total understanding of how markets work, what is value, how is wealth created, how is wealth stored and held. And therefore, those who lead in financial market innovation, who lead in financial market practice mechanisms, can leapfrog from where they are today, where they may be relevant or not that relevant in the global financial system, and become very, very relevant in the future. A recent McKinsey report on financial data and market infrastructure highlights the substantial growth and strategic importance of FMIs. From 2019 to 2023, the financial market infrastructure FMI sector achieved a compound growth rate of 17% in shareholder returns. So financial market infrastructure is no longer this aspect of an economy where you are measuring the size of transactions alone. The value is seeping down into the system whereby they are appropriating returns in profits that are of significant 17% annual, year-on-year annualized returns is not a mean feat for any sector in the world. And therefore, it shows you that the providers of this market infrastructure are satisfying a surging demand for robust, secure, and scalable market stability. During this period, the sector experienced $185 billion in mergers and acquisitions, along with a revenue in 2023 alone of $278 billion. In summary, financial market infrastructure serves not only as a foundational element for the effective operation of financial markets, but now even as a place to go and make phenomenal wealth as an investor, as a sector to play in, just as you would think of oil and gas and so on. So within this framework, Central Securities Depositories, CSDs, play an essential and a very vital role, which has been well described, and I will not repeat. But what I need to stress is this. What CSDs that impress me today are doing is that they are actually affecting the liquidity of the markets. They are actually affecting the depth and penetration of the market. Probably, and maybe that is what the CEO of the exchange group was talking about. More importantly than exchanges, it is what the CSD does that makes millions of retail investors come into the market. It's what the CSD does that removes the risks that are attached to frontier market, emerging market, and makes those who look at Nigeria or throw a stone in Africa and reach any other geography, says that market is too risky. And so, CSDs are indispensable components of the broader financial market infrastructure, underpinning its stability, fostering efficiency, and enabling innovation. Efforts to enhance market infrastructure in the Middle East are increasingly opening the securities market to both foreign and domestic investors. Enhanced market infrastructure and accompanying reforms in the Gulf Cooperative Council states are attracting foreign investors at a very impressive rate. And I know this. In the past 5 years, my participation either in reform efforts in Nigeria or actually in the efforts to, enhance my limited, bank account value, has seen me launch a number of financial infrastructure projects. And a lot of what we have done, either from a reform standpoint or from a new venture standpoint, was based on studies of what's the best thing happening in the world. And I've studied in this area personally, nothing less than 60 countries at a very deep level. And the surprising thing I found was that when I was looking for exemplars, and by exemplars, I look for companies, when I make investments, I look for where am I going to learn from? Where is it that the secret sauce can be found? And I found that many instances, the secret sauce was in the Gulf. And that is why I'm going to give you some figures. You begin to understand that foreign direct investment into Saudi Arabia and the UAE is hitting record highs. Billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. So you think of these markets as just, okay, there's outward flow of investments, but the huge amount of inward flow of investment is staggering. In the MENA region, in 2022, 51 IPOs, $22 billion raised. Saudi Arabia recently established a CCP that has enabled the introduction of derivatives which are being traded. We have CCPs here, but we don't have trades taking place. In the UAE, the Securities and Commodities Authority is actively working to elevate the standards of local exchanges, including the Dubai Financial Market and the Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange, ADX. In 2023, the UAE was ranked as the top emerging market in the MENA region and third globally. In Oman, in Bahrain, where Abdallah is from, activities are taking place which are strengthening the connections between clearing, settlement, Central Securities Depository systems. In Bahrain, I understand that have you done it? Introducing digital account opening. It's done, okay? And e-voting at company annual general meetings as a legal requirement now. So it's not a good to have. it is now a legal requirement that if I'm a member of a company, I can vote at the AGM digitally. I don't need to attend the AGM. Again, understand what I mean by saying to you that market infrastructure puts power in the hands of the retail investor in ways that you cannot imagine. Now, because I've spent time on international financial centers of recent, and over the past 3 years or thereabouts, and I've worked very closely with, as a member or chair of Enterprise NGR, which is an advocacy group in our sector, worked very closely with the governor of Lagos State and the government of Lagos State on the Lagos International Financial Center project. And what we've learned is that the way the world is leapfrogging is countries concentrate their minds on ensuring that a city in that country can rank within the hallowed ranking of what is deemed to be an international financial center. And international financial centers are very, very dependent on the capacity of the financial market infrastructure within those international financial centers. So you will see the correlation between the progress that Gulf financial market infrastructure improvements is making with its progress or their progress in countries in the Gulf as international financial centers. The Dubai International Financial Center reported revenues of $485 million in 2024. I'm saying the Dubai International Financial Center, the center in terms of the services it provides to the financial market infrastructure providers, to intermediaries and companies that are coming there to register. The revenues generated by the center, $485 million in 2024, a 37% increase over the previous year. The Abu Dhabi global market recorded a 32% rise in company registrations, attracting hedge funds, family offices, venture capital firms, and of course, within this veritable market is a need for financial market infrastructure. Now, in contrast, and in this case, I'm echoing the words of a representative of our government, so you won't say that it's Aigboje Aig-Imoukhuede. Where is that I compare? Who said that I speak truth to? This is what government said before me. In contrast, the pace of progress in Africa is considerably slower. And it's not a lack of expertise. And it's not a lack of rulemaking. It's not a lack of readiness to reform. But I told you, at the end of the day, you measure financial market infrastructure by the results, not by how great the project launching it is. So we still suffer a lack of depth. We still suffer stunted growth. We still suffer stunted penetration. 200,000, 300,000 people make our market. Yet, on the back of the financial market infrastructure provided for Nigerians in digital assets, guess how many Nigerians play in that market? I think at last count about 15 million, making us probably the second or third most active digital asset set of retail investors in the world. So you can begin to understand how, if we get it right, we transform so much. And our relevance becomes so important. So this raises a critical question for AMEDA. Are you stewards of transformation? Will Africa be left behind as the global markets and our financial systems undergo reconfiguration? As previously mentioned, geopolitical realignments, digital disruption, and shifting capital flows offer opportunities for countries to reposition themselves as attractive investment destinations. The same high-quality infrastructure, real-time settlement status, and standardized digital technology protocols that are transforming the Middle East are precisely what will catalyze similar transformation in Africa. Over the past decade, GCC countries from the Middle East, have collectively invested over $100 billion in Africa, not in our financial market. UAC, 60 billion. Saudi Arabia, 25 billion. Qatar, 7.2 billion. So, obviously, the MENA region is prepared to invest in Africa. These investments signify a new economic partnership, a new geopolitical arrangement between Africa and the Middle East, and affirm the vision and foresight of AMEDA's founders. So the necessity for strong collaboration amongst AMEDA members to tap into what is taking place at a geopolitical level, at a maybe wider level, to develop in Africa as partners, as investors, as shareholders, as operators, the African capital markets is paramount. As we navigate the complexities of an increasingly interconnected global economy, our collective efforts will be critical in fostering sustainable growth and resilience within our financial ecosystems. AMEDA members, you must pool resources. You must share best practices. You must leverage each member's unique strengths. AMEDA, and this is why I said at the beginning of my presentation that I didn't know the acronym, but having gone and studied it, I understood the power and the transformative nature of your platform and your umbrella. You can drive innovation and transform Africa, not just for Africans, but also for members of your region. This collaborative approach will not only empower individual member states, but will also create a new world where AMEDA, where the Middle East and Africa represent a strong bloc for economic development. Let us commence these 2 days with an open mind, but with courage and readiness for Africa and the Middle East to become truly the new and most powerful kids on the global capital markets block. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you to wait behind, sir.